All right, gentlemen, continuing our look at the legislative branch, Congress. We've talked about who's in Congress and what makes Congress a Congress and what some of the trends are in Congress and all that good stuff. We looked at how congressmen approach their job or their voting habits. Now let's actually look at a little bit deeper into how Congress works and operates and flows. Um, and actually, I realized that I might do better to have. No, we'll stick with this view. So first, let us look at the Senate. We're going to look at both houses and their structure, and then we'll delve deeper into it all. Within the United States Senate, you have the majority leader, obviously representing the majority. I do want to point out, too, it's not up here, but it is a position some of you might have heard about because of the line of succession. The majority party, by tradition, chooses the person with the greatest seniority in their party to be the president pro tempore of the Senate. It is an honorific position by and large. It is the person to basically be the president of the Senate if the vice president is not there. It's basically like the guy who hammers the gavel and calls it to order every day if Mike Pence isn't there. As I said, it is an honorific position required by the Constitution, so there's a presiding officer in the absence of the vice president. And let's be real, the pro tempore and the vice president, they usually don't do anything. They usually have like a stand-in too. I mean, if they're not there, someone else has the gig. It's not important. It's there. It's a fun fact to know that person is in the line of succession. In the fun game of what if the president and the vice president and this person and all are in an elevator that crashes. The president pro tempore, if I remember correctly, is Chuck Grassley of Iowa. Some of you might be familiar with Chuck. He was the Senate Judiciary Chair during the Kavanaugh hearings. He looks about 1,000 years old. Anyhow. The real power, though, is in the hands of the majority leader, who we all know is Mitch McConnell right now. The minority leader right now, the Democrats, Chuck Schumer. So the real leadership is in the hands, though, of the majority leader and the minority leader. The names are self-explanatory. The party that has the majority, the party that has the minority. The task of the majority leader is to schedule the business of the Senate. They usually work together. They understand that they need their body to flow effectively. There is no reason to grind axes. It's just going to be counterproductive for everyone politically. So usually the majority leader kind of consults the minority leader. That's not to say the minority leader tells him what to do. But I would assume that Mitch, before he actually sends out a schedule, runs it by Chuck and says, do you have any glaring issues here that we need to resolve? Because they do want to try and at least work together somewhat. A majority leader who is a strong personality and a gifted politician, like Lyndon Johnson in the 1950s, tends to actually really dominate things. Like a lot of things in government, I think it's about personality and charisma and also just political skill. Each party has a whip. There's a majority whip and a minority whip. The whip is basically the person who's in charge of kind of keeping a running tally of votes. The term or the name comes from the idea of they were to whip people in line. If they were to kind of beat votes out of party members. So their job is to basically go around, kind of keep an unofficial tally of the votes, to know what's going on. You'll probably actually have a couple people who help the whip. They kind of work as a team. Each party will then choose a policy committee made up of a dozen or so senators who will help the party leader schedule business. So you basically have a committee who advise these folks as to what do we need to do, what's going on. in the Senate, the two most powerful or most important committees when it comes to organizing business per se, not actually like passing legislation, but getting stuff organized. For the Democrats, it is the 22-member Steering and Outreach Committee. For the Republicans, it is the 18-member Committee on Committees. And these people are basically the ones deciding who gets appointed to committees. They are not actually running the committees, but they obviously are going to provide some sort of advice as to legislation and such. But they also help determine who goes where. And if you're wondering, your future hinges on your committee assignments, generally speaking, not 100%. But if you get put onto a high-profile committee that's in the news a lot or has a lot of policy influence, that's your ticket. If you get put on a sort of back burner committee where it's going to be hard for you to get your name in the paper and it's going to be hard for you to really press any sort of substantive legislation, that's going to make your life a little more difficult. Now, I do want to point out too, committees have to be balanced, right? You can't put all of your heavy hitters on one committee. You can't put all of your very super powerful, charismatic senators on one committee and then make all of the other ones very weak for your party. You've got to have regional balance. You've got to, you can't put all of your ultra-conservative members on one committee. It is a delicate game. You've got to balance seniority, with getting the rookie some experience. You got to balance the big states and the small states and all that stuff. It is very interesting. Going to the other side of the building, let's look at the House of Representatives a little. In the House of Representatives, you have a lot of similar structure. There are different names, although I will point out the Speaker of the House far more important than the Majority Leader, or far more powerful and influential in their institution. I am not at all, trying to downplay what it means to be the Senate Majority Leader. It's a very important, very prestigious position. But from the standpoint of actually kind of ruling the Senate, the Majority Leader is far less controlling than the Speaker of the House is. The House, because of its sheer size, 435 members, you've got to restrict debate. You have to literally, you tell people, no, you don't get to talk, or you get to cut people off. You have to very carefully schedule when business will be attended to. You have to set about blocks of time. It's a very unwieldy institution. And so the Speaker has a lot of influence. The Speaker is elected by whichever party has the majority. Unlike the pro tempore, it is not an honorific position. It is actually a very important position. The Speaker is not only the leader of the House, but also the leader of the majority party. No, they are not actually the majority leader, but let's be realistic. The Speaker of the House is kind of the face of the majority party. Most Americans can't tell you who the Democratic Party majority leader is in the House of Representatives right now. I can't actually. Hang on. It was obviously Steny Hoyer from Maryland's 5th District. How did I forget that? Yeah, I totally did not know that. Anyhow, the Speaker of the House, though, is, they are the face of the majority party. They are not the actual leader of the party, technically speaking, but they are the face of it. They are the most influential member of their party in the House of Representatives. I will say they are expected to be fair. They are expected to be, not so partisan as to bully the other party. Especially you got to think sometimes your majority is only a few votes. This is not a dictatorship. There'll be an election in a couple of years. The shoe could be on the other foot pretty quickly. Also, though, even though they are expected to be fair, let's be honest. They are from a political party, and they want to serve the interests of that party. And so how do you kind of do that? Well, the Speaker does have some power. They decide who gets to speak on the floor. They literally recognize you and give you the floor. And so they can kind of control who gets to speak and in what order. They get to make certain rules on debate and whether a matter and an issue is relevant to the business at hand, or if it's superfluous, and basically they shut it down. And they also have the ability to assign bills to committee. They don't assign people necessarily to committee. Well, they do when it comes to special and select committees, not standing committees. But they do influence which bills go to which committee, because there are some pieces of legislation that have flexibility as to where they start, right? They kind of cross over into 2 or 3 domains, and the speaker can kind of decide where they want that bill to go. And we'll talk more about that in section 5, where we look at the path of legislation. And boy, is it going to be confusing. But in Section 5, we'll look at how choosing the committee can determine whether a bill ever has a chance at becoming a law. They can determine that. They also do select or determine who gets appointed to a special or select committee, which is important, especially that Rules Committee. Since 1975, the Speaker has been able to select the members of their party to serve on the Rules Committee, and the Rules Committee is one of the most important committees in all of the House of Representatives, because it determines the rules for voting and debate and etc., and that again can kind of determine what the fate of a bill will be. Now, I will say speakers are far less powerful than they once were. As we said previously, going back a number of slides, and I'm not going to pull that stunt, but you had some around the Gilded Age, turn of the century, far more powerful, even into the 1950s. Since then, the power of the speaker has been stripped a little bit. They're still important, but they're not where they once were. I do want to say that both parties will elect a majority and minority leader, even the House of Representatives. The Speaker is not the majority leader. Nancy is not the leader of the Democratic Party in the House. As I said, Mr. Hoyer. Both parties will elect one. Now, by tradition, the majority leader is the backup speaker. So if Nancy Pelosi were to die or to retire, then Steny Hoyer would, by tradition, be elevated to the post of speaker, and then, of course, they would backfill the majority leader spot. Each party, just like the Senate, has a whip, again, running around, trying to get votes counted, get a running tally, so to speak. Now, for the Democrats, committee assignments are made in the Steering and Policy Committee, which is chaired by the Speaker currently. If the Republicans were in charge, it would be whoever the minority leader was in that case. For the Republicans, they have divided responsibility for committee assignments between 2 different committees. There are a bunch of others, and we'll get to more committees here in a moment, but that's kind of your generic structure. Now, because of all of this, and this is where we start to talk about party voting. Party voting has become more important over time, or I would say, I guess, in recent history. And what do we mean by that? When we call something a party vote, there are 2 ways to define it. One way is to say when 50% of the Democrats vote together against 50% of the Republicans, or you could say it the other way. You could take a stricter definition and make it 90-90. Now, I think that is hardcore, but the idea where 90% of the Democrats vote one way and 90% of Republicans vote the opposite way, that would be a very strict definition of party vote. Using the original definition that I said, where it was 50%, if you look at this, and I was just double checking, this is using the definition of 50%. You will notice that the percentage of votes in the House and the Senate, using that 50 versus 50 minimum kind of threshold, you'll notice that, and these are, of course, the Congresses, and I don't have my note in front of me. That was foolish of me. But, you can see that since the 1970s, yes, that is the 1970s, I do remember that. Since the 1970s, we have seen a fairly I won't say consistent because obviously there was, a swing there, but hi 9/11. Um, but you will notice that there has been a general increase. This was basically ever since the 1970s, party vote has increased. We have gotten to where, with only a few exceptions, in the United States House of Representatives since the 1990s, we have been over 50% party vote. And you'll see even the United States Senate has been over 50%. They actually have been more consistently over 50% when it comes to party vote. Now, why has that occurred? It is not just partisan polarization. And by the way, if you're curious today, of nearly 7 in 10 votes coming out of the Congress are party line votes, as you can see. Now, why is this happening? Okay, well, several things. First of all, you're a member of a party. You're a Democrat. You're a Republican. You didn't just randomly pull that out of a hat, I would hope. You have certain ideological beliefs and tenets and things that you hold in common with other members of your party, and things that you hold in opposition to the other political party. So it would make sense that you guys would all sort of stick together on certain things. Otherwise, why would you be in the party? Some of you might be aware, there are various special interest groups that kind of keep a running tally of, who's liberal, who's conservative, who's this, who's that, every one of them. One that I'm just going to throw off, NRA. If you want to know how congresspersons vote regarding gun control legislation, Second Amendment, however you want to term it, go to the NRA's website, and the NRA rates these people. Matter of fact, hang on. Okay, so for example, like I said, here, we'll just do this. You go to Google, NRA congressional ratings. Okay, I actually went to the NRA. Their website is not the most user-friendly, in my humble opinion. I think they want you to register or sign in or something, and we won't be doing that. In case you're wondering, I'm a gun owner, but I'm not joining any association. So here you go. You go to one of these, right? And this is where if you really want, you do your homework, you can get it. But so here, National Rifle Association. These are 2014 candidates, but you'll notice they're telling you how these people rated when it came to voting on gun legislation. Okay, as in basically how often do they support it. And you can get your how to interpret these evaluations, but long story short, you start looking at this, and here, let's go to our state. So, they said Mitch McConnell always votes for pro-gun legislation, right? But then you look at some of these, they have horrific ratings because either I would assume they never did, or here let's check and see what, for example, Karen Housley, that's a Republican. What's the deal? Well, I'm sure that we would have to do a little more digging on this one. Here, votes. Is that it? Votes. We're gonna get stuck in the webverse. I'm sure we can find. Oh, here we go. The issue. Guns. There. Key votes. All right. So this person apparently had one vote. They voted against authorizing gun silencers. Okay, I'm not going to dig into this. The bill passed. They voted against it. So apparently Miss Housley, the one vote that she had in the state Senate, that's the other thing you have to remember. She's not necessarily a national senator. She voted against, apparently selling silencers. I don't know. My point being, trying to get back to where we were before we went down this rabbit hole, is that if you think about it, okay, people tend to gravitate in certain directions. I mean, if you were to look at that chart, most Republicans had high rankings. Most Democrats had low rankings. Republicans tend to be pro-gun. Democrats tend to want to have more regulation over gun or abolish the Second Amendment or whatever. And so it just seems like they would tend to unite across certain issues. Now, another thing you have to keep in mind, you don't, like we said, you go in to vote and you have no real idea what's going on. You're not a member of the committee. It's not a topic you're well versed in. It's not an issue that's really a hot topic in your state or district. You ask the guy next to you who's from the same political party what he's doing, right? That happens. As your book said, it's only natural to look to fellow party members for advice. And there is the idea of you are going to support the party a lot of times. I mean, let's be real. You need to be on Mitch McConnell's good side. You don't want to be remembered as the guy who, in the heat, in a critical moment when we needed all the Republicans to rally around, you're the one who broke ranks. I'm sure everyone is fully aware of Romney during the impeachment vote, right? And how Romney, broke ranks with the Republicans, and people talked about how that's going to be the death of his career potentially and stuff. Supporting the party position can help you in the long run, and it can help your party. I mean, if the party kind of pulls together and forms a phalanx, it's hard to beat, but it also promotes your position within the party. You're a party man. There's a reason for that expression. Party does make a difference. It's not as bad as it was during the Gilded Age. It's nowhere near where it once was in being the end-all be-all, but it is still there. And again, we're not a parliament. It's not the end-all be-all. You can break ranks, but it won't make or break your career necessarily. Your book mentioned also caucuses. This is another form of organization which can cross party lines and has traditionally, although I would say it's getting less so, obviously, as things get more partisan. Caucuses are, your book defined it as an association of congressional members created to advance a political ideology or a regional, ethnic, or economic interest. Let's just call them a club. That sounds like an easier metaphor. It's a club. It's all the congresspersons who are interested in this topic or who feel strongly on a certain topic or share an identity. There actually weren't many of these around back in the day in 1959. There were only 4 caucuses. By the early 80s, there were more than 70 of them. Your book mentioned, for example, the Democratic Study Group, which is more than 200 of the more liberal Democrats. The Coalition, which are actually more commonly called the Blue Dog Democrats, which were the more moderate to conservative Democrats. I don't even know if that caucus is really in existence anymore. As we've said, the number of Democrats who identify as moderate to conservative has gotten to like near zero. You had, the Tuesday group, one that is usually spoken about, the Congressional Black Caucus. It is basically all African American congresspersons. Now, sometimes they actually work as a very strong bloc. Sometimes they are a way of just providing a kind of a negotiating platform. It varies. But the ones that are very solid in their establishment and in the way they operate, they do serve as a voting bloc. And so they are a powerful tool or a powerful way to manipulate or to win over votes, I should say. You get the leaders of the Congressional Black Caucus to agree to a bill. You can basically count on all the members of the Congressional Black Caucus to vote that way. I will say in 1995, the House Republicans eliminated government funding of caucuses. While that might sound like a win, on the other hand, it just opened the door to more special interest in campaign funding. Some of the caucuses have kind of just died because they weren't that important or identifiable, and others just simply found outside groups to kind of continue financing them, supporting them, etc. Now, we will get more into this, but committees. This is where the rubber meets the road in Congress. The most important feature of Congress, outside of just the actual political parties themselves, are the committees. Chairmanship of these committees and subcommittees is actually where most of the power lies in Congress. The chairs of the Senate standing committees are very, very important individuals. They again, a committee can make or break a bill very easily. I don't care how good it is. And the committee chair can make or break that bill. They can basically determine if this thing is going to get fast-tracked or if we're going to bury it in investigations and hearings and we're going to slow it down and we're going to make it jump through 37 hoops and it'll never see the light of day. So those are all, the committees are where the work is done. I think I said it previously. We like to imagine the romantic image of Stephen Douglas on the floor of the Senate, eloquent speech, wins over the Senate, they vote with him, or Henry Clay, or you pick your legend from American history. Truth be told, it's the committees. It's small groups. As your book mentioned, some committees are as small as 6 members, some are as large as 50, and that's where we're really getting the work done. There have been efforts, I will say, to cut the size of committees, the number of committees, not so much the size, the number of committees. That has sort of backfired because it seems like every time you kill a committee or remove one, it gets replaced by a subcommittee. So we just change the level of bureaucracy. We don't actually shrivel the size of bureaucracy. There are 3 types of committees. Primarily, I know you're like, there are 4 bullet points. Ignore this one. There are standing committees. These are permanent bodies with specific responsibilities. Budget, Veterans Affairs. I'm going to actually pull up a list here in a moment. There are select committees. They are created for a limited purpose. They are not there for introducing legislation. Benghazi, for example, that's just an easiest example I can give off the top of my head. They created a congressional committee to investigate what happened at Benghazi, right? And that was all they were doing. They were just investigating and using the power of Congress to subpoena and make testimony and records and all that stuff. That's why that was created. And I don't even know if the Benghazi committee is still around, to be honest. I should have researched it before I opened my mouth. But it's not going to create a law or a bill or anything. That's not its purpose. It's an investigative committee. You have joint committees, which are committees that have both representatives and senators on them. And there is a very unique committee that I'm going to kind of consider a separate group here, the Conference Committee. The Conference Committee, which we will learn more about in 9.5, is a committee made up of representatives and senators, and it's that committee's job to try and rectify differences in bills that come out of the Senate and out of the House. We will learn more about the Conference Committee, but let's just say that the Conference Committee's job is to basically create a bill that is word for word acceptable by both the House and the Senate, because it has to be. I'll go ahead and jump over. There was a chart in your book. Okay. Here you go. Now, for most congressmen, they're busy with committees. There's a lot of committees. So on the House, as you can see, you've got, these are called exclusive. They're a form of standing committee. And as it says, you may not serve on any other committee except budget. So this is like your one major assignment, and then you've got all these non-major assignments, and they are still like standing committees. I mean, they're there all the time. In the House, you had the Benghazi Committee, as I said. Now, in the Senate, I love this. No senator serves on more than 2, although we can ignore that rule. Why do you have the rule if you just can ignore it? But as you can see, you have budget, foreign relations, judiciary, which I mentioned previously with Chuck Grassley, etc. Then you have these minor committees for senators where they can serve. The Senate has several other select committees. And then you have, as I said, the joint committees where you'll have senators and members of the House. For those of you who are curious, senators and members of the House serve on multiple, okay? So, and I had the number written down, I apologize. Each senator serves on average on 2 committees, actually more than 2, so on average a little over 2. Again, no more than 2, although this rule is ignored. It is ignored, which means some senators are serving on 3 of these committees. So each senator is serving on at least 2 standing major committees and then 7 subcommittees. Okay? Members of the House of Representatives, it is very similar in number, which means, as we will see here in a moment, they literally can't make it to everything. They're double booked. It's impossible to make it to all of your committee meetings. But so going back to looking at committees, though, back where we were, all right. Committee chairs used to be the dominant force, as I said. We have made efforts to make changes to that. So, for example, in 1971, the Democrats decided that committee chairs should be elected by secret ballot rather than just going to straight seniority. Speaker Newt Gingrich in 1995 actually just straight up ignored seniority, and he named some junior members of the Senate to committee chairmanship jobs over some more experienced senators. Committee chairs, though, have been the dominant force in this aspect of Congress. Eventually, there were some changes made, and it was in part because Democrats wanting to push civil rights legislation were angry at actually their more conservative Southern counterparts in the late 60s and early 70s. So several changes were made. For example, committee chairs have to, again, be elected by the majority party through secret ballot. That's what I meant to mention. So committee makeup, how does it go? Majority party gets the majority of the seats on the committee, and we usually try and make it proportional to the ratio, which of course means basically in the U.S. Senate, almost invariably, if it's a 9-member committee, it's 5-4, because the Senate is always so close. Only in a large committee where there might be like 30 members, and you're talking something like the House of Representatives, where it's 50, let's just say for fun, 55% to 45%. Then you start doing the math and you figure out, this group gets 17, this group gets 13, or whatever. But that's how we do it. The committee chair will always be from the majority party. So the majority party gets the majority of seats on a committee. And again, it's usually proportional to their seats in the House of Congress, which the committee is attached to. Now, going back to what I said about limiting power of committee chairs. Committee chairs, again, elected by the majority party through secret ballot. The ability for committee chairs to block legislation from going to a subcommittee was stopped or banned. Hearings had to be held publicly unless the committee voted to make them private. So there was no kind of hiding stuff. Subcommittee chairs were to be elected by the committee, not appointed by the committee chair necessarily. Subcommittee chairs were allowed to hire their own staffs independent of the committee chair. So again, we were just trying to limit the influence and power of some of these committee chairmen. When the Republicans took charge in 1995, they did reverse a few changes. They reduced the number of committees and subcommittees, making each one that still existed a little more powerful. They authorized the committee chairs to hire the subcommittee staffs, which they set term limits actually on committee chairmanship to 6 years. In the United States Senate, and they limited, chairmanship was limited to 6 years period, and they limited the speaker to 4 consecutive terms, which means you can only be speaker for 8 straight years, even if your party continues to win majority. The Senate has actually had fewer changes, in part because senators don't really get that upset about not having enough power. Members of the House want to feel like they have more power. Members of the Senate, they know that they have power. Again, a 6-year term limit on all committee chairs. So basically, if you're a senator in charge of a committee, you will be in charge of that committee during your term in Congress. And if you win re-election, you'll get assigned a new position. But committees are where the work is done. All right. And again, some people are eyeballing ones for certain career reasons. Some are eyeballing certain committees for their constituency. For example, if I am the member of the House of Representatives from the part of Virginia, which includes Norfolk, a major a major military population in that area, I might want to be on the House Committee for Armed Services. I want to be on the House Armed Services Committee. Oh, I have a lot of voters in my district who are in the armed services. I want to serve on that committee and push our agenda. Or if you're from a very agricultural region, you're a senator from Nebraska, you might want to be on the Agricultural Committee in the United States Senate. Or if you're in the House Agriculture Committee. But you also might just, that's it's something you're interested in. Like if I were a senator, I'd want to be on foreign relations. I would find that to be fascinating. I think that'd be interesting. That'd be an area that I'd be passionate about. I don't think I would want to be on the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pension. I don't want to be on that. So again, some senators, they go with something they are interested in and passionate about. Some of them, or House members, sometimes they aim for things that are important to their voting district and to getting reelected in the future. It varies by person. Now, staff members. Okay, used to be you didn't really have a staff. In 1900, representatives had no personal staff. Senators averaged fewer than one staff member each. By 1979, the average representative had 16 assistants. The average senator 36. I mean, these people have their own armies. To be honest, the largest or the most rapidly growing aspect of bureaucracy are congressional staff. If you really want to look at it, not in sheer numbers, but proportionally. If you want to look at actual percentage of growth over the years, the bureaucracy surrounding the Congress has grown faster than any other bureaucracy in the United States government. There are more than 10,000 people on the personal staffs of the United States Congress. So there are more than 10,000 people working for congressmen and women. There are another 3,000 who support the committees. So they don't even work for congressmen. They just actually work for the committees that are being held. And then there are another 3,000 that work for the research institutes I'm about to talk about here in a moment. How does, what does one do? Well, for a lot of congressmen, your staff are the ones who do a lot of your troubleshooting. For example, when I tried to get Mitch McConnell, potentially, if he was in the area, to come speak to our class, I spoke to one of his staffers. I didn't speak to him. I called his office, and a young lady spoke to me, and she said, "Well, I'll put you on the list if he's ever in town, and he's got a desire to do that, he will." Same thing with Rand Paul. Same thing with Massey. I didn't talk to the congressman or the senator. If I were to contact them with a problem, they'd kick it up. They're the ones who answer the emails and the phone calls and such, and basically help the senator find ways to get reelected. Legislatively, they go to meetings. They go to hearings a lot. Like I said, these guys are double and triple booked. You're on 2 major committees, 6 subcommittees. The Congress really only works Monday through Friday. Sometimes these meetings last multiple hours. You've got other stuff. You've got to be on the floor. You've got to give a speech. You've got to go to a rally. They miss stuff. They send assistants, people to take notes, people to present information for them. Some of these people are just neutral professionals just doing a job. Some of them are people who see this as a way of them actually getting to play politics. They're very much vested in a certain political ideology, and they see this as an opportunity to kind of how do I want to put this? Influence the information that gets passed on. If I send you to a meeting and I tell you take notes for me, you really control what I'm going to think about what's said at that meeting, because I'm going to base my thoughts, my decision, my opinion based off the information you provide me. And you're basically filtering it, right? You're deciding what notes you're going to take, what information you want to emphasize. So some of these staff members are actually playing a far greater role in policy decision making than a lot of Americans realize. As I said, some are politically neutral and they're just doing a job, right? They're just doing a job, serving their country. And others are serving a political interest. As I said too, I didn't say yet. Some of them find this is a great way to actually help get your boss reelected, which is in your best interest because they're your boss. Hey, I got a phone call from this farmer. This is an easy one, boss. Get this bill passed, blah, blah, blah. You can use it in November. Hey, the airport called. They got a problem. Come on, Massey. Some of these people understand that they can find bills and problems that are easy to solve and fix, and it'll get you votes. Lobbyists know that, by the way. Lobbyists and reporters understand that staffers are very important, and they are the key to the kingdom. And a good relationship with a staffer is worth its weight in gold. So you will find that congressional staffers are always having meals with lobbyists and having drinks with reporters, and it's a two-way street, obviously. One problem I will say from all this is with the staff doing more and more and more, you see congressmen and women, senators, etc., they interact less. It's staffers. I'll have my people call your people. The Congress used to be a collection of men and women who had to do a lot of working together. Now they don't really have that personal interaction as much. Yes, they all work in the same institution, in the same building. They all have the same job, relatively speaking. But they don't really have a personal relationship or connection because their staffs do so much and their staffs interact and things just get passed on and email. They're not doing face-to-face interaction or over-the-phone interaction. And as your book said, it has turned Congress into less collegial and more individualistic. And I think that hurts their ability to do the old school, Lyndon Johnson treatment, where you walk into an office and you kind of use your personal relationship to kind of get things done politically. One last group I want to talk about before we end this one. There are special institutions which support Congress, staff agencies. So in addition to your staff, Congress actually has a few institutions which support Congress in general. For example, the Congressional Research Service, part of the Library of Congress. They are basically 900 people, and they have no political loyalty. They are research assistants. They are librarians. Hey, we need information for this committee hearing regarding that. They are the ones who go digging through the halls of the Library of Congress to find the data for the congressman. And they'll do it for you. Send a request, they will do it. They don't care who sends it. I don't even know if they know who sends the request. I'm saying that in the sense of, I think that they are just told, here's a request for this information, and they go get it. They are not told, Rand Paul said this, because I think the idea is we want them politically neutral. And so, this is a service where basically any member of Congress can get any information that they want through this service. These are research experts. Another one is the Government Accountability Office, the GAO. Once they were just the accounting or auditing firm for the United States. There are now about 5,000 employees there. It is their job to basically, they are basically just accountants. I really don't know how else to say this. They give you the financial numbers. It makes recommendations, though, in general about not just financial. I shouldn't say that. They aren't just financial. Their job is to, how will this affect this? What's the downstream implications? What's the big picture? I think that is an aspect that people forget. They aren't just telling you the financials. That's the budget office. The accountability office will point out where there will be overlap between agencies, where there will be issues with contradicting existing regulations or legislation or things of that nature. The Congressional Budget Office, created in 1974, simply advises Congress on the financial impact of programs and spending and tries to predict future economic trends. And it's basically, if Congress says, oh, we're going to do this, it's the CBO's job to go, well, we forecast in the next 3 years that this will happen to the economy, which means you will actually have less money than you currently have, that sort of thing. Just so congressmen have an idea of what the financial status and predicted future will be. Your next lecture will be the ever so popular 9.5, How a Bill Becomes a Law. I'm not trying to scare anybody off. We are going to work through how a bill becomes a law. And here, I'll just go ahead. Yeah, we're going to go through this chart. Calm down. We'll go through it slowly. I'll also link you all to the ever so famous Schoolhouse Rock, I'm Just a Bill, video, which breaks it down. It's how people in my brother's generation learn this. But we will cover that, and we will then kind of look at how some of these committees and subcommittees and conference committees work, etc. But that is for another time.